Hey everyone. I'm just testing to make sure that this thing is working properly. Let's see if anybody's watching. It's been a while since I've done this, so apologize for what is happening as I tend to get this thing moving. But don't. Okay, so it looks like it's working. I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to share my screen with you as soon as I figure out how to do that. There we go. Okay, so I apologize for all of the detail here. So what I hope you see, let me do a quick check, perfect. What I hope you see is my presentation, and let's see if you are able to, well, I guess I'll find out if you can see it or not. Actually, let me do this. Let's just play it safe. And I will share my entire screen, just so I know for a fact you are able to see what I see. Okay, so now we're doing the infinite thing. Okay, sorry about that. So I know that we've taken a bit of time. So today I wanted to share with you some tips for anybody who is looking to run a design thinking program in your classroom or in your schools. I kind of, thinking about what to offer, what knowledge I could offer, because a lot of you who are listening and watching will be experienced in so many things around education, working with youth, working with students. So my hope is that you do take something away from this and kind of add it to your own arsenal of skills that you have. That's kind of why I wanted to put this together. So a bit of background about me. I started a not-for-profit organization a few years ago called Y2 Entrepreneurship Labs. And the goal of Y2 was to work with students to give them opportunities to develop their problem solving and innovation skills and really nurture their entrepreneurial mindset. So I'm going to go through some of that over the course of since I started this. I've worked with more than 1,000 students, run 8 conferences. I'm doing things in classrooms, running something called ICE challenges. So in Ontario, those are design thinking workshops that are focused on addressing specific challenges that an organization in the community may be facing. And then finally, I've been training teachers on design thinking as well. So there's a picture on the bottom right as an example of some teachers that I recently worked with. So I'm bringing some of these tips and some tips and lessons that I picked up along the way. And again, hopefully this will be useful to you in some way. Just to anchor it though, for those of you who are not familiar with the design thinking or may not have run a session, design thinking is a bit different than traditional kind of outcome-driven or education where the answer is evaluated. So with design thinking, it's more around the mindset and the process. Specifically, looking at a problem, beginning with understanding who is impacted by the problem, how they're impacted, what do they do today to cope with the challenges that stem from the problem, and then what do they need on top of all that. So it's really starting there and using that as inspiration to proceed. So empathy is pretty key. The process within design thinking is because there's not necessarily a set outcome. There's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of failing. There's changing direction or pivoting. And a lot of that's driven by getting user feedback and feedback from experts who may be very well versed in the challenge. And because there are many, and there are many solutions to solve the same problem, and so students who are going through a design thinking process, may encounter insights from existing solutions, may encounter or run into insights that come from talking to people who are affected by the challenge or from those who work closely to them. And so the students will build, they'll build a prototype, they'll get some feedback in the sense of measurement, whether it be quantitative or qualitative. They will reflect and learn from that feedback, and then they'll take the learnings and iterate their prototype and change it, and go take those changes and go and get additional feedback. So experimentation, failing fast, pivoting, iterating are very key to design thinking. And something else with design thinking that I've run into that I've seen is because students will often work in teams, it really is an opportunity to work with others, learn about others' strengths, and play to your own strengths and leverage other strengths. It's really, there's a lot of teamwork, collaboration, communication that's involved in design thinking, especially in where students are working in groups. But even if they're working solo, learning to leverage strengths of users or experts or so forth, community partners is key. So again, design thinking is a bit different than kind of answer-driven tests and so forth, which is a little bit of a shift of mindset. So yeah, the journey is more important than the outcome. And kind of with that in mind, what if I shared with you 4 tips that have been particularly useful for me in my own journey with teaching students and teachers about design thinking. So the first, and I'll go through each of these. First is really creating a hands-on experience. Secondly is creating a setting that's real world, that has both real world context and impact. Kind of looking at evaluation techniques that looks at students' learnings during the journey and not just on the answers they give for the outcome. And then incorporating, there are variations on design thinking that can be incorporated if you're looking for specific skills that you want to develop in your students. So I'll go through some of those. So the first one around hands-on experience. What I found handy over the iteration of the program that Y2's done is that spending too much time at a time on instruction can get really boring, and the students become disengaged. So what we've started to do is alternating. So 10, 15 minutes of instruction, 45 minutes, 30 minutes of work time, and kind of alternating that way. So it's almost like moving the ball along. Let the ball roll, kind of add some motion so the ball's rolling, let it roll on its own. Then when it slows down, come back in and apply more propel the ball to move forward. And I'll show you an example in the next slide. The second thing that I found handy is staying away from digital and technology in the sense of computers and laptops, tablets, and so forth, which might be a little not the way things have been going from a technology standpoint. There are variations that I've used where we do get into digital prototyping, but at least for the first little bit, the first prototype, I encourage students, and really I ask them to put away their laptops. We use worksheets. There are Post-it notes. We have provide markers. If they are oftentimes if they're constructing a prototype, they are building it through popsicle sticks and glue and construction paper and more arts and crafts, things that really allow them to kind of involve their bodies and not just stare at a screen. And like I said, if as a second or third iteration, there is desire on your part to incorporate digital website or building a website or building an app, absolutely can be done. But I found staying away from digital is a new way of engaging students, and I've yet to run into a student who really is not happy with doing something arts and crafts. And in fact, most of the time the reaction is very positive and very enthusiastic when they see the colors of the construction paper and the Post-it notes and the markers and so forth. So it's actually a way of engaging students more, I found. And the other thing I found too is if students decide they want to leave in the middle of a design thinking session, midstream, they kind of miss the end-to-end benefits. So meaning that if they start from the beginning and they have identified a problem they want to work on and the person who's affected and how, there is some closure. If the student stays right till the end and they presented their solution, even if it's a 2-minute show and tell with their group, and they've been through the entire process and they can make sense of it. So I find that encouraging students to stay for the entire session, even if it's a 4 or 5 hour session, or if it's over the course of a semester, encourage them to stay engaged throughout and see it through to the end has been helpful for them to learn via participating in the entire process. So I mentioned an agenda. We're alternating between instruction and work time. So this is something I did recently with a community partner called 360 Kids, which north of Toronto in Canada, they're based in 360 Kids is a youth shelter. So they take in they work with, they offer programming for at-risk youth as well as youth who have become homeless. And so for the first session, the first part of the design thinking workshop, we form groups. The 360 Kids team shared their 2 or 3 top challenges. Then we come in and offer some instruction to help the students refine the problem statement. They build the user persona. They do some role play interview to understand needs. In the real world, as an aside, I would send the adults to go talk to people who are affected, but given A, time constraints, and B, a lot of times I'm teaching younger students. I don't want to be sending them out. So we do role plays just to kind of give the students an opportunity to experience asking people for feedback and really applying their empathy, but do so in a safe environment. Then we get into brainstorming. We then work encourage students to build a prototype, which is unstructured time, and that's where they will use the construction paper, and they will use the materials that we brought for them. And oftentimes, because we're going through lunch, I let them do a working lunch. So if they want to leave, or if they want to take a break, that's fine. But if there are some groups who want to continue, so we let them do that. And then finally, we'll give the students the opportunity to share their prototypes with the community partner, in this case 360 Kids, so that there is some closure, there's some feedback. There is often, we encourage the community partner to provide feedback, ask questions, and engage with the students, so the students do feel that they've been heard, they're acknowledged, and then we do reflections and wrap. So the thing I wanted to call out here is that for majority, kind of the bulk of the middle, so from 10 in this case to 1:30, it is a combination of a bit of instruction and then a lot of work time. So the problem statement, I think I talked for 5 minutes and they have 10 minutes to refine. For the second part, the customer persona and role play, I think I talked for 10 minutes and then they have the rest of the time to work. So it gives you an idea that it's not just talking heads and it's not unstructured either. So the second thing, real world context and impact. When we've invited in community partners, again, organizations from the local area, when we've done that, we've encouraged the partners to share real problems, not fictitious and not fluffy, but real problems that they are facing, and give the students an opportunity to tackle something that's really on top of mind for these organizations. A lot of times, the partners will take some of the ideas offered by the students and bring it back to the office, because the ideas are relevant enough or innovative enough that the community partner representatives want to bounce it around with some of their colleagues and implement a variation of that idea, or an idea that was inspired by what the students offered. There are places to look for potential partners. So if you've got access and relationships with your local chambers of commerce or boards of trade, look there. Incubators, and this is referring to organizations that help startup companies begin, oftentimes located or hosted by universities or colleges, local government or kind of regional and or provincial or state governments will offer incubators oftentimes. And then there are grassroots communities, so communities of business owners and entrepreneurs who will band together, who maybe in the form of meetups, maybe in the form of kind of loose communities that are separate from chambers and boards. That might be something in your area that you could tap into. So there are places to look to find community partners who would be interesting for your students and offer challenges that your students could tackle. Something that I touched on before around building a persona. I found building a persona and getting really specific. So giving the persona a name, talking about what they do day to day, talking about what they're doing now to cope with that particular problem. So, if the problem that the students want to tackle is around air pollution and they are driving towards clean air, the persona might be somebody's 75-year-old aunt who lives by the highway, and she's got asthma. And in the summer, particularly in July, August, when it gets hot, and cars are sitting during rush hour and smog is pretty bad, and intensifies with the heat. This 75-year-old aunt's asthma gets so bad that she can't go outside. And so what she needs is somebody or some solution to help her get groceries and walk her dog and so forth. So the persona takes a very big problem and kind of brings it into something, to a level of challenge that the students can get their heads around, and allows them to build empathy. And so they can start really feeling what this aunt is feeling, or whoever the persona is. So I encourage the students to get pretty deep in their personas, because it makes it a little more real world. And finally, if you do decide that you want to work with community volunteers, so to act as mentors or advisors or judges or what have you, them sharing their experiences can provide additional real world context for students to understand, life in industry or not-for-profit or whatever. So again, creating a real world context, I found has been very helpful and very engaging for students. I'm kind of going through the slides right now. If people are asking questions, I will take a look in a second before I wrap. So apologies, I'm not seeing your questions just yet. So the next thing is evaluating students' their learnings. And I know that that's something that I've heard from teachers quite frequently is, yeah, design thinking is good and all, but I don't know how to evaluate it. So I want to share with you some rubrics and assessments that a local school board worked on in partnership with Y2. So the first is the rubric. So the challenge in the school board that I'm thinking of, they were comfortable, obviously, evaluating individual students' contributions and how they did things, but they were not comfortable marking students or giving students a grade based on team. So that's fine. Their learning consultant came up with this, which was based on some stuff that I've been using with other private schools. So for the individual evaluation, the teachers would be looking at kind of the presentation itself, so nonverbal communication, and then verbal in terms of how the student had shared their information. So pretty common level 1 to 4, and then there's some breakdowns along the way. So for nonverbal, really it's around nonverbal cues, so eye contact, expressions, body language, and then for verbal skills, did the student know what they were talking about? Did the student articulate their ideas in a way that was understandable? So those would be the focus, and this is really centered around the show and tell at the end, when the students are presenting their ideas. As far as then giving the students an opportunity to kind of do an evaluation and reflect, this is something that the teachers would be able to do for focusing on the solution. So if the students have, they come up with an idea that would help the 75-year-old aunt, I'm going to go back one slide. So this slide would look at how did each student share their idea, and then this here would be looking at how effective the solution was. And now I'm getting to teamwork. So with the team, again, in this school board, they were reticent to and unable to mark students based on team performance. So they gave the students the opportunity to reflect on how the team works. So this is one on kind of how the team functioned, and then that's where students would share their insights. So that's kind of a lot of the evaluation side of things around how to look at the design thinking process and incorporate both marks and feedback, or sorry, reflection. So the last tip with design thinking, what I shared earlier was one version, and kind of for me, it's a standard version of design thinking. There are several that might be relevant for you. So I'll go through each of these. The first variation is to let students pick the problem. So rather than the community partner coming in and saying, this is what our challenges are, give students the opportunity to choose what matters to them. And so this chart is something that I show students, and I go through a few of them. So I'll talk about examples around waste management and how there might be one challenge that might interest students is here in the area I live in. There's recycling programs at the curb specific to glass and cans and paper, but not something like styrofoam. So maybe there's an opportunity. Maybe that problem of lack of curbside styrofoam recycling is something that the student's interested in, or under mental health, cyberbullying is something I tap on. I draw on quite a bit. So I'll paint a scenario of a 16-year-old student who went on vacation. She came back, put some photos of herself from the beach on Instagram, and then got body shamed. And so I'll throw that out as a challenge that perhaps some of the student groups want to tackle. And I'll give them a couple of examples. And the reason I do that is to let them kind of feel what the challenge might be. And oftentimes they will reject what I share, but they will have their own idea that they want, their own problem they want to solve. So this also, I show this to try to encourage students to focus on real problems and not make money for the sake of money. Like when I do design thinking, the objective is not to teach students how to start a business. It's more, let me give you tools to go tackle a problem that's meaningful to you. And if you make money along the side, and if you want to continue solving that problem, you do need some money, even as a not-for-profit, to continue the operations. That's great. But really, we start here with a problem that means something to the students. Another variation, if the students build a prototype in using paper, and they decided that they want to go further, there are some free tools out there, whether it's designing logos and using Canva. If they want to build a non-working app, so what I mean by that is if students want to create the home screen and a few key screens for an app, they can use something called like marvelapp.com. It's free. And they can design an app that automatically renders from a phone to a tablet to a computer screen. If students have a 3D object, if they want to show an example of a factory that would do something, or a truck that would be set up to be a mobile medical center. They can design that in Tinkercad, and they can then print it. And then for websites, if they want to show what their website or whatnot would look like, they can use Weebly. There are other tools too. If they want to show how whatever it is they're doing would work, they can create a video, post it on YouTube. If they're designing a course, they can use something as simple as Google Slides to show what the material would look like and so forth. So these are just examples of tools that students can use if they want to take their prototypes beyond paper and turn it into something digital, which enables, if it's online, then it becomes easier to get more feedback because then you can just use social media to share the link to your prototype. That kind of leads to this, this variation. So for any, if within your program you're thinking you would like some more data management, or you would really like for students to, get more feedback and actually get feedback that's outside the classroom. So your objective may be getting real world feedback, or your objective may be increasing the amount of data that students need to process as part of a math unit or something. Asking the students to create surveys, share a link to their digital prototype, leverage their social media, leverage your social media, leverage your network social media to get the link to the survey out there so that more people complete it. And provide feedback to the students. That's absolutely a variation, which I've done with several groups, and it's been very useful for them to hear what real life people say rather than just kind of their friends. Another variation, again, when I teach design thinking, it's not, the primary objective is not to teach students how to start a business. It's to develop tools and mindset to solve problems. But if there are objectives, if you have a business, if you're working with a business teacher, or if you yourself are an entrepreneurship teacher, or if your students are interested in taking their idea and submitting it to a local government's summer company or summer, create a business over the summer type company or what have you, or if students are interested in entering a startup competition, anything kind of with that business element, incorporating some modules or a module around building a business model, that could be interesting as well. And this is the business model canvas, which is downloadable and easy to find online. Just need to Google business model canvas. Finally, or not finally, I think I've got a couple more. So if you are interested, if you want to spend some time and formally teach your students how to build a pitch presentation as they might present, in the style of a Dragon's Den, I've incorporated that. So teach them, you got to mention what your name is, which I realize is a bit silly, but there are teams and companies that forget. Make sure you outline the problem. Who's impacted by the problem, how they impacted, how do you know? Go through the solution, show your prototype, share insights that you derived as you ask people about whether or not the solution addresses the problem. Who did you talk to? Customers, experts. What evidence do you have that your solution, that you understand the problem correctly and you've validated your solution with people? And then who else offers solutions that address the same problem, which is something to build credibility. So that'd be something to incorporate in the pitch presentation. Financial plan, and in some cases, with some schools, they've been interested in their students learning how to stitch together a narrative to share their project, but they've been less interested, the schools have, around the financials. So as long as the students have a sense of, how the key elements of cost, or the key cost elements, key revenue assumptions are making, great, but the schools have not been interested in some cases to go through a detailed financial plan. So this is why it's, I say, if applicable, depends on the focus of what you're trying to accomplish with your design thinking program. And then finally, the plan itself for the pitch. So for the students, what would they want to do next? So I go through this with actually with quite a few of the design thinking programs I run, because the teachers are interested in the students having a bit of structure to tell the story of their problem and their solution. And then if the agenda I showed you earlier was kind of a 9 a.m. until 2 p.m., kind of a program that we covered in a day. There are schools I've worked with that have done kind of much deeper dives into a longer term program. So in one school I worked with, they did what I'm about to show you in 6 weeks. Another school has done it over the course of a year, and they just handle it differently. So there are variations. At a very high level, the first thing that I want to tackle, and it's you would probably be able to relate this back to the earlier agenda, but understand what's the problem, who's impacted, build a persona. And in this case, I usually divide that into 2 sessions. The next is build a solution and get feedback and iterate. And then build a presentation, so it's that pitch presentation. Then finally, doing a formal presentation to advisors who may be teachers, but also maybe people from the community, so industry. And so that could be something that's stretched out over a full year, can be stretched over a term, could be stretched out over a couple of months. And I've seen all variations of that. The last thing I'll show you is another variation where if you're doing something, design thinking, problem-based learning, that you do, one variation of that from a delivery standpoint is it takes place in one class. So you designate one class, day 2, period 4 is your problem-based learning. Programming, and the students come in and all the instruction and all the independent work takes place in that session. Another variation, or one variation of that, is that you have your core, but you have another 1 or 2 classes. So you've got your problem-based learning or PBL class, and then the teacher of the PBL class is working closely with, in this case, business information technology and integrative arts. And so if there's something that's happening within PBL around building the prototype, well, integrative arts might be the right place for the students to not only do work during that class, but also get some instruction and be marked, because they are building a website, and for that particular class, in terms of what curriculum you're required to deliver, there may be some elements that could be marked. If the students are building a website for PBL, they could also have it marked for integrative arts. So this is where the 2 or 3 teachers work together to coordinate their calendars. The idea of integrating with many classes, if not full, all classes on a student's calendar, that's ambitious. I do know one school in Markham, Ontario, Canada, that is doing that. And they've really had to evolve it over a number of years, trial and error, and then sitting down and formalizing. But this is a scenario where you've got kind of a core PBL program, but it's linked into religion or ethics or family studies. It's linked into math, into geography and so forth, French, if there's a translation for those who have French that students are required to take. And so what happens there is that if there's an exercise in the PBL, such as financial forecasting, then from a math standpoint, it can be incorporated as, from an applied math perspective. So it's, admittedly, there's a lot of coordination. It probably is not where I would start, if a school is brand new to this, but it is out there. I've seen a model that operates, and reasonably successfully. I was just at a session with a bunch of teachers, 40 teachers, maybe a month ago. And 6 or 7 teachers from that school sat on a panel when we shared what variety of different schools are doing in this design thinking space. And they had some great firsthand stories of how they're coordinating across different programs. The math teacher was there, the science teacher was there, in addition to business and so forth. So it's possible. It takes some time to get there because it's not easy. But there are definitely some variations on how to deliver a problem-based learning or design thinking program across 1 class, 2 classes, or many classes. So, in conclusion, I want to thank you for sticking it out with me. Things that I've seen handy with design thinking is designing a hands-on experience, making sure that the challenge and the environment is anchored in the real world, evaluating students' learnings, not just on the outcome, and then finally there are variations that can be incorporated to focus on specific skills depending on what you're trying to accomplish with your students. So if you want to reach out, you have any questions after this, I'm going to go to the questions in a second, see if there are any questions in the chat. But if you have any questions, please follow up with me. All my contact information is there, and you're welcome to reach out. So I'm going to see if anyone said anything. So I'm going to just kill the screen share. Okay, so it doesn't look like anything is happening on the chat side of things. Let me just check really quick and see if there's anything happening online, and it doesn't look like it. So yeah, if I've missed any questions that you might have, oh, so Lisa, that's awesome. So just see this. Yeah, give it a shot, Lisa. And if you have any questions with you could give it a shot, or if you want a sounding board to talk about how to structure, how to give it a, how to structure your whether it's a day or a few hours or whatever you have in mind, like reach out, Lucas at y2labs.co. I'm happy to help, and I can dive deeper into some of the stuff I've shared today. I'm going to do one more check and to see if there are any other questions. Oh, okay. So Lisa, you're asked to talk about primary students. So I've taught, just for whatever it's worth. The students I've taught, majority have been between grade 7 to 10, but I've done design thinking with students as young as grade 5. So that might be on the higher end of your age group, but like I said, I can share with you what's worked, and you obviously have your own experience that you would incorporate. So I can share with you what's worked for me with the 5s, and things that I've observed with 4s, although I haven't done anything formal with them. And you can take whatever whatever's useful, and then try it out. So with that, if you're seeing this after the live hangout, feel free to email me with any questions, lucas@y2labs.co. I'm happy to help. And other than that, at this particular moment in time, it's 1:31 on a Sunday, Eastern Standard Time on May 5th, and it's gorgeous outside. So for those of you who may also be enjoying great weather, hope you have a wonderful day or night or wherever, whenever time of the day you're seeing this. Reach out if you have any questions, and go out there and rock some kids' worlds. Thanks very much for listening and watching, and take care.